Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. So this started 2 to 3 years back. I just experienced a terrible breakup and I started receiving this disturbing phone calls. It started simple. The first call I answered and the person on the other end said how much they missed me. Now, I have a very small circle of friends and I am not on Facebook or in any social media site where I update my photos or my daily activities. And this is important to note. I also know that my ex that I just split up with had nothing to do with the following. The first call, like I said, was simple. They said they missed me. I asked who it was, and they said, "It's me. Don't you remember?" So I hung up, and they immediately called back, crying and upset that I was being mean, and the caller was clearly an adult male. But they were talking as though they were a very young child, around 6. So I hung up again, and they didn't call back. Looking back, I should have blocked the number, but as I mentioned, I just got blindsided by a breakup and I wasn't thinking very well. Then, they kept calling. They would call, and if I didn't answer, they left me messages. They were saying how pretty I looked with my blue sweater that day, or that they knew how I took my coffee now, and said that they would remember it for when we finally went out for a drink together. I blocked the number, and they would call me from another one. I answered one day, yelling at them to leave me alone, and I hung up again. When they called back, it wasn't the boy, but his mother. She was very upset and said that I was hurting her boy by not wanting to play and that you could very clearly hear the boy crying and screaming in the background. At this point, it dawned on me that this wasn't a joke, a prank, or something of that sort. There was something seriously wrong with these people, and they were obviously watching me. For a few weeks following my breakup, I had to live in my car. The entire time I hardly slept. I was terrified, thinking that I would wake up one day and see him standing outside one of my windows. When I finally got a place, he called to congratulate me, and he couldn't wait to come and play. I haven't heard from the people for a year now, but I checked my phone after a very busy work day, and I noticed 10 missed calls, and I'm terrified to check my voicemail. I've reached out to the cops, but they wouldn't do anything since I haven't been explicitly threatened, and I have been advised to just block the calls. I'm going to change my number, but I'm absolutely terrified that the calls will continue even after that, and that it will upset them further. I have posted this, and people have been kind to reach out with advice and tips for me, but I feel like I'm living a horror movie. When I was in 2nd grade, my family took me to a carnival. It's a seasonal event to celebrate something about the town being founded, but I don't really know much of the details. But every year, a carnival opens up near the center of the city for 3 days. It has all kinds of things, including games, food, rides, fireworks, and entertainers too. So, being 7, this place was like Wonderland to me. I'd gone the year before as well, and I had a great time, so I had been waiting for it all year long. At this year's carnival did not disappoint. The air was filled with the scent of cotton candy and popcorn, and as I explored the colorful attractions, my first priority was to check out all the rides that they had so I could ride them all. But my parents, however, needed to get tickets, so we had to wait in line for them before we could go on any rides. The line was long, but moving fast, so we were at the ticket booth in only a few minutes. The rides required a ticket fee for each one, so you'd have to buy tickets in bulk and give some to the ride operator when you entered. My parents had decided to get 40 tickets, thinking that that would be enough, and then we were on our way. The first thing that I wanted to ride was a mini roller coaster. Well, in hindsight, it was just a kiddie ride, but back then, it looked like a lot of fun. Even now, when I'm in my teenage years, it's still a fun ride to go on, but back then it was even better. So, of course, I went on it first and foremost. The ride costed 2 tickets, which surprised my parents. Apparently, last year it was 1 ticket per ride, but this year, each ride had a certain cost of tickets per person. So, the 40 that they had bought was a lot smaller than they realized. We continued to go on rides together and have fun until we ran out. And fortunately, there were a lot of rides that we hadn't gone on yet, and there were a lot that I wanted to do again. Seeing that they needed to buy more tickets, my parents left me at the kiddie area of the Carnival, a place where you could leave your kid if you needed to go to the bathroom or something and not have to worry about things. That's when I noticed one of the caretakers there. He was dressed as a clown with a painted smile on his face. I noticed him mostly because his eyes were fixated on me. No matter what I was doing, whenever I looked at him, he was staring right back. He kept watching me, his eyes never leaving me as I wandered through the rides and games. The clown then approached me, offering a balloon with a grin. After taking it, he then started to talk to me. "Hey, little buddy, wanna see something amazing?" He whispered, making it sound super secret. My instincts told me that something was off, because he wasn't offering this to everyone, but the clown persisted, insisting that he had a special surprise just a short walk away. In hindsight, my stranger danger alarm should have been going off, but I was just thinking that he was trustworthy since he worked there. So I began to walk with the clown as he held my hand. My heart raced as I saw him motion towards a parked car at the edge of the Carnival. Now, I was definitely getting suspicious of this way. That's when I asked him what the secret thing was. He smiled at me and then held a finger to his lips. He said, "Well, it wouldn't be a secret if I told everyone," and then continued to walk towards the car, now a bit faster, almost pulling me as I walked beside him. That did it. My stranger danger alarms were finally going off, so I ripped my hand out of his and I tried to get away. But that's when he turned around and grabbed me. I screamed as panic set in. He was now carrying me, kicking and screaming towards his car. He was so much bigger than me, and there wasn't much that I could do. But I remember what my parents taught me, and I just kept screaming. But those screams were drowned out by the joyful screams and the noise from the Carnival. I was crying at this point, not giving up, but I just felt in my soul that it was the end for me. That is, until I saw my dad sprinting towards me. I screamed out for him, and he yelled at the clown. The man turned around to see who called for him, only to be met with a fully grown man tackling him to the ground. I fell to the ground as my mother ran to me and was holding me close. My father was on top of the clown, hitting him, until a bunch of men in uniforms grabbed my dad and then pulled him off the jester. They put handcuffs on him, and someone was talking on a walkie-talkie. My parents hugged me tightly, ensuring that I was safe now. After some time, a police car came and then took the clown away, and then we got into our car and followed them to the police station. What followed was a woman in a police uniform asking me what had happened and then assuring me that I was safe. After an hour of that, me and my parents went home, and I slept in my parents' bed that night, both of them holding me closely. After that night, we didn't go to the carnival in the following years, as the memory of that sinister clown served as a chilling reminder that even in a place that should be safe, danger could be quietly masking itself. As the city bus rumbled along its route, I settled into my seat, immersed in the soft hum of conversations around me. Glancing outside the window, I noticed him. At first, nothing seemed wrong, as he was just a man wearing baggy clothing and had very dark circles around his eyes from what I assumed was a lack of sleep. But as I stared at his eyes stared back. His gaze lingered on me, and a sense of discomfort crept. That feeling of discomfort only grew as the man boarded the bus and sat beside me. He was trying to strike up a conversation. I tried to be polite and answer in short, curt responses, but then his questioning quickly veered into unwanted territory. He started asking about my dating life, and then asked for my number before I could even open my mouth. Politely, I declined when he asked for my number, but he kept insisting, which was really starting to freak me out. After the third time, I told him that I was not interested at all. His tone then shifted, darkening with frustration and an uneasy feeling gnawed at my gut. Sensing danger, I firmly reiterated my refusal, my pulse quickening as he became agitated. I looked around at the other people on the bus, hoping that someone would help me, but they seemed to be looking away, not wanting to get involved. I tried waiting for my stop, but the bus seemed to be moving at a crawl as I wrestled with the decision to leave my seat. As he persisted, my heart pounded and anxiety gripped me. The atmosphere on the bus grew thick with tension, and a few passengers nearby glanced uneasily at the unfolding scene, but still no one said a thing. Summoning courage, I decided to make my move. I rose abruptly, clutching my bag tightly, and I hurried down the aisle. His footsteps echoed behind me, each one a chilling reminder of unwanted attention. Fear surged as I realized that he was following me, and his words escalating into threats. I was one stop away from my own, but I didn't care at that moment. As long as I wasn't here, I wouldn't mind walking an extra 5 or 6 minutes. So I pressed the button to notify the bus to stop, and I got out the second the doors opened. But to my dismay, so did he. Panic fueled my steps and I quickened my pace. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I sprinted towards safety and my breaths ragged. Ducking into alleys, doubling back, I managed to shake him off. Tears welled in my eyes as I managed to make it onto my street. I ran to my house and I fumbled to unlock my front door, relief flooding over me when it finally swung open. Once inside, I locked every door and window, my trembling hands dialing the authorities. As I recounted the harrowing encounter, the reassurance and swift response were a lifeline. I shuddered at the realization that danger could lurk in the most ordinary places, but my ordeal ended in safety. The echoes of that night lingered, a chilling reminder of the shadows that sometimes trailed too closely on public transit. I live in a city that is currently going through urban decay in population. Therefore, we have a considerable amount of abandoned houses and also abandoned businesses throughout the city. When I was a teenager, I used to love seeing abandoned buildings. But now, they're an eyesore and attract a lot of dangerous people to the city. That, and YouTubers and TikTokers all looking for clout and to profit off showing off the area. Sorry, but it really makes me mad when it happens, especially when the rich kids come in with no self-awareness or respect for anyone else. When I go for a walk at nighttime, I make sure I'm strapped and I take my dog with me. Wolfie is a mixed breed. He looks angry and vicious, has a mean, scary bark and will defend me. But when it comes to his family, he is so loving and just a giant goofball. I really love Wolfie. It was dark outside and most people went into their homes. People don't like going out late at night. I live with my extended family in one small home, so I will go crazy if I don't get out of the house. So I put my dog's leash on and then we set out. Wherever you go out at night, always make sure that you're aware of your surroundings. I never have pods in when I'm out because I want to hear if someone is getting close. I noticed there was a light in one of the abandoned houses. Homeless people go in them sometimes. Some of them just want to get off the streets and mind their own business, while the others destroy them, do drugs, and otherwise fuck things up for everyone else. Instinctively, I began to walk just a little faster. Wolfie seemed to notice my change in mood. There were a couple of streetlights that were out of commission. Naturally, the city wasn't doing their damn job to fix it. I wasn't going to walk where I couldn't see, so I tried to subtly turn around to walk back the way I came when I heard someone call out to me. Now, there were no way I was going to run or show signs that I was scared, so I just kept walking. "Hey bitch!" The voice was loud this time. My dog turned around and started barking and snarling, and my hand went to rest on the top of my gun. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to say anything. He stopped and put his hands up and instantly began to back off before he ran off. If he had been a crack addict or something, there is a chance that he still would have charged at me. I didn't want to push my luck, so I made my way home, still with the feeling that I was being watched and even followed. Not that I saw anyone though. My dog was alert and I knew that he was going to keep me safe. Normally I go out for a walk every day, but the day after, I found myself avoiding it. But on the second day, I knew that I had to get out of there and face the growing anxiety head on. I took Wolfie out with me and I took my gun again. The house with the light on was completely dark this time, with no sign that anyone was in there. I figured that the homeless man must have moved on. I avoided the parts where I couldn't see, but from a space between two homes, I heard someone calling out for help. I stopped. It was dark down there, and Wolfie looked agitated. A part of me wanted to go and help whoever it was, but this was a dangerous city, and I needed to protect myself. I wanted to call out to ask what was wrong, but my gut instinct told me to get out of there. And so I did. I made my way home, and I called the police when I got there to tell them all that I saw and heard. They told me that I was smart not going to see what was wrong. I asked them to go and see what it was, but since there wasn't a crime, they weren't too concerned by it. As expected, there was a reason. A neighbor left the house and went to see what the problem was. She was robbed, but fortunately managed to get away before something worse happened to her. Her son came home from work and found her in time. I'm not sure of all the details about it, but she is okay and alive. Some people say that they were going to kill her, while others were saying that they were working for a human trafficking ring. I don't know what would have happened if I wasn't aware of the situation. I might not be here today. My boyfriend was driving and I was sitting in the passenger seat. It was nighttime and we were traveling across the state to stay at my parents' place for a while. Our rent got too expensive and we needed somewhere else to stay so we could save up to get our own place. Not really relevant to the story, but it provides some background. We were casually listening to the radio and chatting between ourselves when it started to rain. Okay, this wasn't too bad. Driving in the rain wasn't a big deal. We had the headlights on and drove through the country road. Unfortunately, our trip slowed down when my boyfriend couldn't see anymore. We stopped at one of those 24-hour service stations that had warm food inside of it. We went in, we sat inside, ate, and other than the clerk there were no other customers in there with us. But then a beat-up looking truck drove into a parking spot. A scruffy, wet-looking man with dirty clothes came into the service station. We noticed the smell. A musty, foul, and almost fishy odor hung in the air. Maybe he was a fisherman, or just maybe didn't have any decent hygiene. We tried to be polite and didn't end up looking at him. He walked around looking at the items, and then he came and looked at us. Whenever we would look at him, he would drop his gaze and then look elsewhere. I noticed him doing this a couple of times. I figured he wanted to borrow some change or something, so I just ignored him. My boyfriend and I forgot that he was there during our conversation, and finally we finished our food and the rain was beginning to ease. So we went out and got in the car and then drove off. We noticed some headlights driving behind us. My boyfriend recognized that it was the same man at the service station. And since we were driving on the highway, we didn't think too much of it. He was probably just headed toward the same place we were. It was only when we drove into his parents' suburb that beat-up looking truck followed us. We pulled over by the side of the road and then he did the same. He didn't get out of the car though. He just sat and stared at us with the headlights still on. My boyfriend was going to get out, but I grabbed his arm and I told him not to. We didn't know if he had a gun or some other weapon with him, and I didn't want him to get hurt. He stayed in the car with me, and after a while, we drove off. I wasn't surprised when I saw those same damn headlights following us in the rain. I really didn't like this. We drove around for a while, but we couldn't speed up because we didn't want to crash. It's hard to explain, but he just seemed to disappear. We saw the headlights, and then we didn't. I don't know if it was just a weird glitch that happened, whether he drove off or what happened. It's a mystery. Maybe people in the comment section could help me work out what happened. So we spent time at my parents' place, and we had to go get some extra blankets and towels for the house. We then noticed the missing poster, and the guy on the photo was him, the driver who was following us. He looked cleaner though, healthier, and they said there were grave concerns for his health. We reported it to the police, but there were still no leads. The posters for him are still up around town and through the small town gossip. I heard that his truck was stolen and not seen again. I think it's one of those stories where there is some truth to them. There were some other reports of him being seen, but he was a ghost. I don't think that's the case though, and it isn't bad taste to say that he is a ghost or to make bullshit stories about it. I don't know if it was actually him or not, Maybe he was staring at us because he wanted help or something. I feel bad if we were his last chance. But we equally didn't want to get hurt either. It sucks how you have to be careful about who you help because some people are crazy or predatory. But you gotta do what you need to do. I don't know if he was ever found or if he remains as a missing person. I think it wouldn't have been anywhere as unsettling if it wasn't raining at that time. The thick rain made it difficult to see, and we had to go slower unless we wanted to avoid the risk of a car accident. I'm not really sure how to end this. I'm a 22-year-old female, and I was on vacation in San Antonio with a friend for New Year. In retrospect, I would have picked anywhere else to celebrate, but I had never been to San Antonio before, so I thought that it would be cool. When we pull up to the place, it's very obvious that it's not in a great neighborhood, but it was extremely cheap and also within walking distance to the Riverwalk. I'm no stranger to questionable neighborhoods, so I wasn't too concerned about the area as it was very quiet. On the day of New Year's Eve, my friend got food poisoning and asked me to get some stuff from the gas station down the road. I wasn't comfortable taking their truck, and since it was only an 8-minute walk, I started heading out. I got to the gas station with no problem, but they didn't have Pedialyte, so I started walking to another gas station that was only 5 minutes away. And this is where it gets sketchy. I'm halfway to the next gas station, and I notice that there's 2 homeless guys walking around outside their tents next to the street that I'm on. Originally, I was going to walk right past them and just pay them no mind. But when I got closer, I could tell that they noticed me and they were staring at me hard. I'm 5'5", not super athletic, pretty strong, but I'm not taking my chances with 2 grown men. Instead of going straight past them, I just turned the corner. I assumed that they would go about their business and just leave me alone. But I hear one of them say, "Hey, Randy, come over here." And I glance behind me and I see 3 men now following me. They are far enough away where I'm not worried, but I'm extremely cautious. I glance behind me again after a few minutes. They're hunched over and huddled up, like they're trying to sneak up on me, and they're much closer this time. I make the smart decision to say fuck the Pedialyte, and I just round the corner back towards our place. I'm maybe 1 to 2 blocks away when I check behind me again, and they have also rounded the corner and are now walking quickly. Well, I start booking it, and I hear the men behind me yelling at me. I didn't look back this time, but I could hear shuffling feet breaking into a run. Thankfully, I made it inside before they could see where I went. I peeked out of the peephole in the door, and I watched in horror as these 3 men came barreling around the corner and started frantically looking around for me. They're arguing and then pointing around, but eventually they went away. If I wasn't so alert, I shudder to think what would have happened. And no, I did not get the Pedialyte. I had to get it delivered. I'm in the process of applying for a new job and started contacting various places to see if they were hiring and also sending in my resume. About 3 weeks ago, I got a text from a director saying that texting would be easier to keep in touch about filling out my application and also setting up interviews. I ended up meeting him twice about 2 weeks ago, 1 to see the facility and 2 for an interview. Since then, he's passively said things such as how pretty I am and that I would be a perfect fit and etc. But there's no actual updates on the job. He also tried asking me out multiple times, but he tries to make it seem like we would be talking about the job. I've tried not to reply as much as possible, and I have been ignoring him because I don't want to work with someone like that. Well, yesterday, he messaged me to tell me that he was sending flowers to my apartment building. I never gave him my address directly, but it was on my application. I said thanks, and then I ignored him because I was freaking out. And today, he asked if we could meet up for coffee because he's in my neighborhood. I didn't respond to him. About 2 hours later, I took my dog for a walk and I passed by a coffee shop that is 2 streets over from my apartment building. And he was sitting in a booth right next to the window. We didn't make direct eye contact, and I honestly couldn't tell exactly if it was him. But I kept walking, and he almost immediately texted me asking if that was me that he just saw, and if I wanted to come back to the coffee shop. I still didn't reply. I live in a huge city, so what are the chances that he was at the coffee shop in my neighborhood that was close to my apartment just by chance? Was he just waiting for my response that whole time? Or am I just being paranoid about being stalked? Please, let me know your thoughts about this. I encountered this one on the 2nd of January, a couple of days ago when I was asleep in my room. I'm an 18-year-old female living in Singapore with my parents. I'm sorry if this is pretty long, but I would appreciate if you take your time in listening and commenting your thoughts about it. In my family, it's only me, my mom who is 38, and my stepdad who is 40, living in a small apartment. I have my own bedroom as I'm an only child. My parents took the smaller room and I have the master bedroom, which has a big window that is facing the back of our house. For my bedroom, there's a big space outside our windows that's between every apartment unit over here, so there's no way that someone would unintentionally stand near my window. You have to walk in and go for a few turns before coming in here. Well, I eventually fell asleep at around 11 p.m. and I forgot to close my blackout curtains for my window. Exactly at 1:23 a.m., I checked the time when I accidentally woke up. I heard 3 loud knocks on my room window, which eventually woke me up as I'm a very light sleeper. At where I'm sleeping, my window is on the right corner and I can see whatever shadow that gets through it at day or even night. On that night, I didn't switch on any of my lights, so it was total darkness, except for my table lamp that was shining at me at the highest brightness. At first, I was sleeping while facing my room door, which was on my left, so I had an automatic response to turn my head and look at what's knocking on my window. And to my surprise, I saw a silhouette of a man's head that was clearly visible on my window. I had goosebumps and I froze because I wasn't sure of what to do as the curtains wide open, so obviously that man can see me through my window. And despite my parents' room being right next to mine, I went into shock and I had to call my mom to help me check if I was just tripping and to also close my curtains for me. I told her what I saw afterwards, and in the end, she advised me to sleep in the living room for the meantime to calm myself down. I felt really uneasy that night and I couldn't go back to sleep. So I stayed awake the same night. I heard 3 more knocks coming from my bedroom at 3 a.m., which of course I had to assume that it came from the window. And before this happened, My curtains were already closed and blocking my window's view, so I thought that it will be fine for me to go ahead and get a little look on who or what knocked on my window. The only difference is that this time, the knock was louder but slower, like the ones you would experience as if you're in an old haunted house. I come to think about it until now, I wish I just stayed curious and stayed in my living room. I had my face and hand holding onto the window since I had to get a closer and clearer look since I didn't see a silhouette when I was standing from a distance from the window, and me still being paranoid from what happened hours before. I saw a man who is around 180 centimeters plus standing outside my room window, about 4 meters apart, standing and staring straight at me, who was currently frozen in place at the window when I saw him. He was wearing gray long pants and a black t-shirt and really, really pale skin. It looked as if he had no expression when he saw me. By this time, I wasn't really sure if it was the same man that stood outside at around 1:30 a.m. As much as I was tired that night, I knew that I wasn't hearing things or just having hallucinations. I was perfectly wide awake when I saw that man. The moral of the story is always check your windows before falling asleep, and it's best to get a blackout curtain to protect yourself. Of course, guard your window with protective measures. The story happened about 1.5 years ago when I was around 19, and it will always stay with me as it has definitely given me PTSD and a greater fear of men since it happened. I had just moved into a college apartment with friends, only finding out a few months later that there was improper ventilation leading to humidity and mold inside the bathrooms and other spaces. Maintenance or management would proceed to label it as discoloration and to just leave the windows open or buy a fan and stop taking steamy showers. This was hilarious since none of us enjoy hot showers and take at most a lukewarm one. This advice was given after this event, and ignoring my reports that I made to law enforcement and the main landlord. However, we were barely adults and had never had to deal with such a terrible mold issue. We were buying sprays and cleaning the ceilings, crevices, the tub, and etc., constantly in fear of mold inhalation. We found that this and leaving our window open with a mosquito screen locked helped the most. The small window, the size of an average human head, about 9 feet off the ground, facing the other apartment's window, was of no concern to us when we were using the bathroom. After all, we had walked outside and made sure no one could easily look in. Of course, I could not predict what could come next. On our front porch, we had some pumpkins and a single white chair that was barely used this night, and this will be important later. One night, after airing out the humid bathroom after a shower, I wished my roommate good night at around 2 a.m. before going to use the toilet. I was wearing the baggiest shirt ever, thankfully, so nothing was exposed while doing so. But I nonchalantly flush and I go to wash my hands while glancing to the left where the window was ajar as usual. And that's when I saw it. In the pitch blackness of night, contrast to the blaring, cheap bathroom lights, there was a pale round orb with a mop of dark hair atop of it. I still cannot explain the feeling that I had, almost like someone is whispering to you just audibly enough where you need a second or two to register what they had just said. That pause and a quick turn to the right and then a quick spin right back for the window. I saw a white arm leaning into the mosquito screen for support before whisking away and down and out of the frame. It moved, and without another thought, I found myself running for the front door, yelling, "Someone was looking into the bathroom!" a few times to my roommate in the living area. On a side note, do not ever chase after a perp, no matter what the case, even if it's hard with adrenaline running through you in these cases. I heard her yelling back while I found myself already at the bottom of the window outside, now hearing scuffling through the wood chips outside our apartment building. It was clearly the sound of someone escaping through the shadows, no mistaking it. I could not see anyone through the shitty trees that were planted, and stopped as I could not pinpoint where exactly he ran. I thought about yelling some cheap insult or a threat to scare him, but I found myself feeling waves of shock silence me. I ran past my roommate, grabbing my phone from inside and calling my mother, who advised me to call a non-emergency number in my town. And I did so, while sitting on the patio with my self-defense items and also with my roommate. The lady that answered was annoyed, and she sounded like she did not believe me no matter what I said to her, because I did not get a good look at him. She simply sighed and said the police will be over to survey the complex a few times, and then she hung up. My roommate and I were in shock, just sitting there in silence. We discussed in detail what just happened. When we saw a cop car driving around an apartment complex 1 block away, then immediately drive off after 1 minute. Obviously, this left me feeling defeated more than before. I got angry, I stood up, and I examined the area outside my window myself. I saw no footprints or markings that were unnatural, and even tried standing on the electric boxes outside to see if I could look inside. But not only were the boxes too narrow for someone any bigger than myself, as I have a small shoe size compared to the average man, but this will only allow for a view of half of the ceiling for a second or two before falling off. This was not how he looked in. I knew from the way he had struggled to get down. I saw enough of his torso to determine that he was around 5'8" and had to have some other way to easily be staring in like he had. It was also odd that he had darted off without me seeing him, and only hearing him, because there are sensors placed around the complex, with one right by our bathroom window. When triggered, they display a bright and blinding light that lights up the whole back area and the side of our apartment where this occurred. I brainstormed for a second before darting off past it. It didn't go off. When I walked back to my roommate, that's when it did. I tested this twice over, and it had the same results. It only worked when you were not running past it. I felt a sense of relief, only to the fact that I was not so crazy. I was the only witness to this, but I could tell that my roommate believed me. We headed back to our front door, talking about what we would do if he would come back. Obviously, we would be keeping our window closed now, but we had to give him just desserts, we thought, in our exhausted and overwhelmed teen heads. That was when I joked about grabbing one of our pumpkins and hitting him over the head with it, when I stopped in my tracks. "Hey, didn't we have a chair there?" I asked. The white patio chair was gone. We looked around, and it was nowhere to be found. I gasped, and I almost fell to my knees. That's how he did it. My roommate hurriedly looked through her phone, and she remembered having a food order earlier that day with a photo confirmation. Approximately 4 hours earlier, there it was. The bag at our door that was sitting directly on a white chair next to our pumpkins. The same chair. I immediately posted to social media sites asking for help finding this distinct chair thinking that it would be the last hope we could find in finding this pale-faced creep. Not only had he been staring into our bathroom for God knows how long, but he had surveyed our front door area and possibly looked in through the windows here as well, although the blinds were closed. Our apartment made sure to install the worst kind of blinds that you can never fully close, so if anyone wants to look in, even into your bedroom, they would just have to crouch down a little bit. We felt disgusted and shocked, and I left 3 voice messages with the apartment complex the next day, informing them of the incident and about the issues with their ventilation. And as you expected, no one ever got back to me, which was weird since they always did previously. I felt like everyone failed me in this moment. I did everything that I could, but I never received any closure or solace. In fact, I received tips from other college girls in the same area, telling me of very similar experiences, where they sometimes had the full view of a greasy older man even touching himself to them. Recently, this past few months too, there have been numerous sexual assaults as well as peeping toms in the same area of our apartments. Funnily enough, the clear descriptions match what glimpse I got of him. But still, the police never caught anyone in connection to these cases. I never viewed this area as a bad area, and I always took every precaution that I could, but I still felt at fault now. I know that I am not, but I hope everyone living in a similar situation make sure to at least close their shower curtains to shield yourself, or close their windows when the bathroom is in use at all. I wish I could buy security cameras, but I know management would file a complaint about it. I am moving out soon, so this is the only solace I have of getting out of there and leaving this all behind me. And to the greasy, stinky, pale pervert who I stared eye to eye with all that time ago, I hope that we never meet again, for your sake. Hello friends, I've been a lurker of this subreddit for a long time now, and I figured that it was high time that I shared some of my spoopy tales. First and foremost, my name's Mikey. I'm in my 20s, and this story happened when I was still a munchkin, below the age of 12. You'll have to excuse how overly sarcastic the story may seem. It's still scary to talk about, and humor is my defense mechanism. Anyway, when I was still knee-high, me and my grandmother, whom I'll call Tilly, used to go on yearly road trips either across our own country or the one next to ours. We lived relatively close to the border. Well, on this particular occasion, we decided to travel across our neighboring country. Let's call my home Country A and the neighboring one Country B. My grandmother had a friend in the more yeehaw part of Country B that she hadn't seen in a minute, and after some planning, they figured out the best time for the two of us to make our trip. I was excited when my grandmother first told me about the trip. I had no idea where we were going, but the idea of going on a road trip with Gram was so damn exciting. I could hardly contain myself. Fast forward a few months, and we finally hop in the car and head off on our merry way. The trip would take approximately a week, and my grandmother wanted to see all the neat stuff along the way, and traveling with a child such as myself required a lot of pit stops. I wasn't necessarily a bad traveling companion, I just had a small bladder. Well, anyway, we were on the last stretch of the trip when my grandmother had to pull into a gas station to fill up, and we were practically running on fumes. And I really had to go to the bathroom too. We pulled into this middle of nowhere gas station, and after my grandmother had filled up the car, we then hurried inside so I could empty my bladder. The moment that we walked inside, all the alarm bells in my tiny brain went off. I had no idea why I was feeling the way that I was, up until I set my eyes on the clerk. Now, I'm not usually one to judge a person by how they present themselves, but old boy looked like he walked straight out of a serial killer documentary, and that's what I'll be calling him from here on out. Currently, we're smack down in the center of Yeehaw territory, in the middle of nowhere, and this man looks like he should be selling you high-end cars, not working at a rundown gas station. Old boy was giving me all kinds of bad vibes. I really don't know how to explain it other than that. Worse still, he was already smiling a little too widely when he spotted my grandmother. She was petite, blonde, and beautiful. Granted, I'm a bit biased. She is my grandma, you know. However, when he saw me, you could have sworn he was looking at Sunday dinner. Somehow, his already very wide grin only grew, and remembering it, even to this day, gives me the heebie-jeebies. Thankfully, Gram could sense a disturbance in the force and shielded me from his predatory gaze. She paid for the gas and asked for the key to the washroom, which he took his sweet-ass time getting. She walked with me to the bathroom, which was disgusting by the way, and I quickly did my business. And then we returned the key with great reluctance. Here's where things get progressively worse. When we were piling back into the car, old boy closed down the shop and got into his car. It doesn't seem too weird, right? Sure, he was super creepy, but he hasn't done anything too odd yet. Now, technically, we had 2 days left on the trip. My grandma would drive in increments, 4 hours on the road, an hour off to explore and then fill up and etc. Then we would find an inn or a motel and spend the night there. We traveled about 8 hours a day before turning in for the night. Well, when we left the gas station, old boy followed us for, I shit you not, the rest of the trip. At first, we assumed that he was heading in our general direction. It was just the one road after all. But after the third turnoff, and old boy was still tailing us, my grandmother finally realized that we were being followed. This man proceeded to follow us for, I wish I were joking, 12 hours. And my grandmother refused to stop driving unless it was absolutely imperative. For anyone wondering why she didn't just call for help or why she didn't pull into a police station, don't worry, you're not the only one. To be perfectly fair to my grandmother, she didn't have a phone, and despite somewhat knowing where she was, it was still unknown territory. She wanted to get to familiar surroundings so there wasn't the risk of getting lost. We finally made it to the city where her friend resided, and that's when we pulled into a police station. The mad lad pulled up next to our car just as we headed inside the building, and he watched us. I don't know what old boy was taking, but he sat there while my grandma talked with a lovely lady at the desk. Thankfully, the cops handled the creepy man with ease, but I will never forget the damn smile that never left his face while he was being escorted away. Needless to say, that was the last time that we road tripped to Country B, and one of the last times that we actually took a road trip in general. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons. my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.